Of course, it's hardly news that Trump has always had designs on reigning as a monarch with unlimited power rather than serving as a mere president in a democracy.
Welcome to this week's Wacky Moments of Liberal Expression. It's a stressful time. You're likely stuck at home, but the leftist media always provides moments that you just have to chuckle at or maybe even groan over. Like this moment that requires a tinfoil hat. Grab them if you got them, folks. MSNBC's Joy Reid claims that Donald Trump will use the coronavirus to make himself a monarch.
But go off, apprentice guy, go off. Of course, it's hardly news that Trump has always had designs on reigning as a monarch with unlimited power rather than serving as a mere president in a democracy. But with the country facing an unprecedented public health crisis, what lengths might he, backed by an attorney general whose writings and actions point to a fundamental belief in an all-powerful presidency, at least when the would-be king is a Republican, what lengths might Trump go to expand his power under the guise of national security?
Yeah, what links can we possibly imagine or conjure up rather than actually report facts at a time of a health emergency? Excellent insanity at MSNBC this week. It gets even better. On Morning Joe, they enter a fantasy land where Obama's staffers get to advise President Trump.
Is there one thing you would tell him to do now, whether it be an actual move or working on his messaging to the American people?
I'll be honest, Meek, I'd ask him to resign. I think he's the worst failed leader our country has ever seen.
Well, that is really surprising since Seth Harris worked for the Obama administration and not the Trump administration. But the leftist media played around with a lot of things that could be, but they're really not all that they seem this week. On CBS, they actually aired footage from a hospital treating coronavirus in Italy while discussing the need for medical supplies in New York.
This is the main hospital in Bergamo in Lombardy province. It's one of the most advanced hospitals in Europe.
New York's governor says FEMA gave the state 400 ventilators. To that, he said this.
This is an absolute constant. This killer pandemic is virtually out of control.
The mayor of Los Angeles says New York could be a preview of what's to come.
CBS later admitted it was a mistake. Not their entire news organization, just that piece. But, you know, baby steps, right? Now, one thing the leftist media all stepped out in unison on was dismissing the notion that somehow the Democratic focus on impeachment while coronavirus was breaking out was in any way an impediment to government reacting to the outbreak. In fact, to even consider that would be dangerous.
I think this is dangerous for Mitch McConnell to suggest that impeachment was impeding the government response to coronavirus.
It's totally reckless and irresponsible, in addition to being totally untrue.
Do you think it's fair for the Republican leader to be blaming the administration's failures to prepare adequately on impeachment?
No, I certainly don't.
Do you buy that at all?
I think that's an admission that perhaps the president and the majority leader cannot handle the job.
Pelosi rejected the excuse floated by top Republicans that the president was somehow distracted by the impeachment saga.
I don't think that argument and talking point is going to pick up much traction.
So what's your reaction to the Senate Majority Leader laying the blame to the government's response on the House of Representatives and impeachment?
Well, it's laughable.
Not as laughable as working with Democrats to get their talking points out there, though, right? I mean, hey, they'll do whatever it takes. NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, MSNBC all gave zero time to the sexual assault allegations leveled against Joe Biden by a former staffer by midweek this week. You know, compared to the 305 minutes of nonstop coverage they gave Christine Blasey Ford in the first dozen days after she accused Justice Brett Kavanaugh. But hey, it's not like they didn't have the chance to ask Joe Biden about this during his multiple TV appearances. They just didn't want to. You know, they had other questions.
You know, your strength is in traveling around the country and connecting with people, right? Connecting with voters, looking them in the eye, a hug, a handshake, especially in these crucial months before the election. And you can't do any of that right now. Mr. Vice President, does that worry you?
Mr. Vice President, what is President Trump's level of culpability? What's his level of responsibility, say, toward the illness and fatalities we're witnessing every few minutes these days?
I put it slightly differently. What is his responsibility And what if there wasn't, and you know, allocating responsibility is, you know, I'll let history do that. But it's clear that a lot of people, not just me, but a lot of people saw this coming all the way back in January.
Ah, yes, back in January after Trump announced that Chinese travel ban, and Biden said,
in moments like this is where the credibility of the president is most needed, as he explains what we should and should not do. This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia, and fear-mongering.
yeah, that travel ban, that act of hysteria and xenophobia couldn't have been out of actual concern. I mean, you know, I wonder why the media didn't play that clip of Joe. Maybe because the leftists have to silence the messages they don't like, especially President Trump's press conferences this week.
All right, so we're monitoring all the late breaking developments on the coronavirus. We're anxious to hear what Dr. Fauci has to say, what Dr. Birx has to say. We anticipate that they'll be answering reporters' questions fairly soon. Once that starts, we'll go to that briefing over at the White House. In the meantime, I want to bring in Daniel Dale, our fact checker. Actually, I guess the question and answer session on the coronavirus has started. Let's listen in.
We'll get through this.
All right, and you've been watching the coronavirus task force briefing. Good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. You saw President Trump there and Vice President Pence.
So how do we cover these? Is the choice as stark as not to take the president's press briefings live, which I actually think would be a mistake, or is the answer to live fact check them?
Well, I think there are two questions. One is, do we carry them live, and how do we actually cover them?
I bet they'll continue to cover them in their usual way, with bias and omission. I'm Eric Shiner for MRC TV. Please check out the cool conservative gear at MRC-store and the great stories at MRCTV.org. Please like and subscribe on Facebook as well as YouTube, and leave your comments below. I'll see you again next week with the latest in leftist media wackiness.